and of course, the handsome Tom Lancaster. We're here live from Vancouver, and the MacLean boys are joining us from Scotland. Last January, they rowed across the Atlantic Ocean and smashed a world record. And today we're going to share their story with you, and they're going to tell us about how they used an emphasis on joy and pleasure to overcome adversity. And it's going to be a fantastic story. We're so looking forward to sharing this story with the world. How are you guys this morning?
Very well.
Good. Very good.
Thanks very much for having us.
Fantastic. So which of you would like to kick off and just tell us about the process that got you started? What were the series of events that led to these three Scottish lads rowing across the ocean?
When you go, Lala?
Who wants to? All right, okay. I will kick it off then. So I'm Lachlan, and I'm the youngest of the three. And I'm 22. It was actually probably about 3 years ago. I saw this advertisement for the Talisker Whisky Atlantic Challenge, which is an annual rowing race across the Atlantic. This year's race is actually about to kick off in about a month's time. But I saw the ad for it a few years ago and was planning on doing it with a good friend of mine. And then kind of just told Jamie and Ewan about it. Initially told Jamie about it, and then Ewan caught wind of it as well. And so then I would obviously much prefer to do it with my two brothers than, with a friend, although not to say anything, that's nothing on him. It's just you'd prefer to do it with your own family because you just know them on a much deeper level. So taking on a big challenge, you kind of, I guess, to share an experience like that with your two brothers, I think we all agreed that was something very valuable. And then I think the reason that it appealed to all of us, none of us had done any kind of rowing events. We'd never done any rowing in our lives. We hadn't really done any endurance sports. I'd done a couple of big cycling trips across Europe, but all very, very relaxed. So it was very much so a step into the unknown. And then Jamie, I don't know if you want to take over there.
Can I jump in quickly before Jamie? What was it about this that appealed to you, Lachlan? Because I would venture the vast majority of humankind, the concept of getting in a little boat and subscribing to 2 months of the Atlantic Ocean is the most horrifying thought. That whereas for you, obviously, it grabbed your attention and caught hold of you in a big way. So what was it that excited you about it?
I think it was probably one, the scale of the challenge, but also just how far out of my comfort zone it would be placing myself. I think it was just, as I said, kind of unlike anything I'd ever done before. And I kind of knew, I suspected that it would be a huge adventure. And I think that appeals to me, just on kind of like a basic level of, I guess, personal fulfillment, taking on as many challenges as you can, and kind of, I guess, a hunger for different experiences. I think that was the main appeal of it. Yeah. And
That's
I
a good answer. I'm sure there was some less healthy things as well that were like, I definitely have a thing where if someone says, "Oh, I don't think you can do that," or doesn't believe that you're able to do something, that's a real motivator for me. And it's one of those challenges that you hear about and you're like, is that even possible? That sounds just ridiculous. You can't row across an ocean. And then the more you learn about it, and there was plenty of people that were kind of doubted that, that you'd be able to do this kind of thing. I doubted you'd be able to do this kind of thing. And that was a bit of a motivator as well, I think.
And then I think underlying all of that for the three of us was, I think, like, everyone in their day-to-day lives searches for like a meaning of purpose, and not only for your own personal fulfillment and your own personal purpose of what you're doing in this world, but as a cohort with friends or family, and then as a greater sort of trying to make a wider difference to people all over all the world, or it kind of impact other people's lives in a positive way. And I think the row from the very beginning gave the three of us a whole new meaning of purpose for what we were working towards. And then it just grew, it just snowballed from there, and it grew arms and legs that we had no idea that it would kind of develop into that. But it was just taking that first initial step, and then what we sort of, I don't know, we're getting from it. Yeah, I certainly a huge amount of purpose and drive in your day to day, and then that fed into kind of how we could then make a positive impact to other people as well. So I mean, so we soon learned about the ability of the road to raise a huge amount of money and make a significant difference to charity, and so we then that incorporated that into the whole campaign, and that was sort of a side campaign of its own, the whole charitable fundraising element that ran throughout and is kind of still ongoing.
So you guys clearly, like from the outside looking in, you guys, the three of you, are incredibly powerful manifestors of reality, right? You came across this race, you'd never done any rowing before, you decided you were going to do it. Within 12 months, you'd raised £150,000. You trained to, while training, while doing all of this stuff, this impossible task. And then you got in the boat, having never done it before, decided you were just going to have fun, and killed the record by 6 days, right? The previous record was 41 days. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And you did it in 36. So it's a considerable slicing of time.
35. Yeah.
How was the experience of creating it for you? Like from the moment that you decided that you wanted to take part, from the inside, what was the experience like of raising the money, of training, of getting all of the logistics sorted, and then doing the actual race?
Yeah, so I think we were really keen from the very beginning to do every single element, every single part of it as well as we possibly could. So that started, the very, very beginning was just coming up with a name and designing a logo. And it took us weeks. It took us weeks and weeks and weeks. And there was probably about 150 different logo iterations, just because we really wanted to present ourselves as, as professional as we possibly could. And we wanted people to kind of take what we were doing seriously. But then that went through to kind of training. We were complete amateurs. We didn't know anything about rowing. Didn't come from a military background. Hadn't done much endurance sport. So we were complete. We absolutely accepted that we knew just nothing. So as a result, would speak to just as many people as we possibly could. And I think through that, perhaps got kind of a broader, broader set of experiences and connections with network than we would have done otherwise. Just because we were desperate to, learn as much about, what were the important things in our training we needed to think about, making sure that we were flexible in the right places, and we were, weren't going to give ourselves an injury really quickly. And then that feeds into diet, how are we going to eat throughout that year, and really learning from the basics and just saying, look, we don't know anything. Yeah. Let's just learn as much as we can.
Yeah, I think kind of on that vein, there's almost something quite nice about coming from that angle of we know nothing, because I think that maybe some people, we were kind of conscious that we were kind of total, I don't know, amateurs and in many ways kind of underdogs in the whole thing, because it was just so out of our comfort zone, I guess. But kind of as a result, we knew that in order to persuade other people of our credibility, we had to just do every step as well as we could, and be open to the fact that we knew nothing. So we need to just find out as much information as we can, and then take the advice that we deem to be the best. But it's quite a nice. It's kind of like, I don't know. It's quite a nice perspective to come from, because there's no ego in that. You're coming from just we're a bunch of three chumps just trying to figure out how to do it, not pretending to know more than than we did know, or yeah.
That beginner mindset is so crucial for success in anything. When we come in thinking that we know everything, even if we're very experienced, being able to approach a new problem from a position of I don't know anything and what can I learn is so crucial.
Yeah, it was a really thrilling experience, actually, to get start from absolutely nothing to build up, quite a lot of knowledge in an area. And so many people that kind of, I don't know, I guess we're all fairly young, but people that kind of start with a new challenge and completely say, look, I don't know anything, but I'm okay being an amateur, and I'm okay making these mistakes at the beginning. And so if you look at, like, I mean, an extreme example is like Elon Musk. Like he just goes into new areas and goes, I don't know anything about this, but I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn everything that I can about this thing. It was an amazing experience to condense a thing down into a year and then just like learn.
But even within that year, it was broken down into other little bits that in themselves were incredibly fulfilling. So like once we had the first art, we did the logo and then made a sponsorship deck. That felt like the first sort of hurdle, the first tick the box. Then we had these really nicely printed sponsorship decks. We went around all the potential sponsors, didn't hear back for a while, and then when that first email comes in that we'll get on board with 5k or 10k, it's kind of just like, it's like a huge celebration. And then it's just a series of that, and then the whole thing begins to build its own momentum. And then you've got the charitable fundraising as well, and you've got the events, and then little by little, kind of people who doubted you at the start then begin to take you a bit more serious. And then that in itself it's just an incredibly fulfilling process. Even if you took away the row itself, if it was just a sort of a race to see who could get to the start line, that in itself would be almost more rewarding and more beneficial to the three of us than the actual row itself. It's not to say that it was all smooth sailing. It was also an incredibly stressful year. Like it was just so intense, but that's kind of what we'd signed up to.
I think the most humbling bit of the whole thing, or the most amazing bit for me, was building this network of people that started. The first people you speak to, you're like, I'm going to row across an ocean. People are like, what? You're absolutely mental. And then slowly you get someone on board who's like, yeah, okay, cool, I'm gonna help out. And then before you know it, I mean, by the end of the year, there were hundreds of people that were helping us in various ways, coming to our fundraisers, training us, teaching us, helping with their services to do whatever it was. And without that, there's just absolutely no way we'd be able to have got to that start line. So although we were kind of on the oars, that there were so many people behind that made that a reality. And I think that creation of that network and a large number of people believing in this idea, believing in this thing that we're trying to create, that was the most amazing thing for me, I think.
That is definitely a phenomenal experience when you decide that you're going to do something, and then the energy starts to come behind it and other people start to enroll. It's a pretty good feeling. Why not take us through what's a day in a life of an ocean rower look like?
So which part, when you're at sea, or the bit before, the year of stress? And
why don't we start in the year before, in the year leading up, and then we can get into life at sea.
So who wants to start? It's probably different for me, Jamie and Lachlan. I think I was working during the year as well. Jamie and Lachlan were.
We were studying, Ewan.
We were studying, Ewan.
Students, honestly.
Taking all the glory.
Yeah, so I mean, a standard day in the months leading up to the race, to the start line, you get up. I would have uni, so I mean, it depended on what sort of deadlines I had on at the time, but I'd try and get that done within the window. We had an idea of what we were eating, so we were mainly eating vegetarian stuff, especially in the months immediately prior to the race. So you have a big bowl of porridge, and then I'd get all my uni workout during the day, and then either during the day at lunchtime or late afternoon fit in the main session of the day. That we normally had like at least one session every day. Maybe not, maybe 5 or 6 times a week, and that would last for about 2 hours, and it would be mainly in the gym, mixture of mobility, flexibility work, and then depending on what kind of period we were in our program, it'd be sort of strength and conditioning, a wee bit of erg work, but not too much. And that obviously like varied. So like to begin with, it was more emphasis on flexibility, mobility, and then it moved more into strength and conditioning, and then it moved into sort of injury prevention immediately prior to the race.
And so then, you mean rowing machine?
Yeah, sorry, yeah. Rowing machine.
That's interesting to me. So your training for a rowing race involved a little bit of actual rowing, but not very much.
No,
in the gym. Yeah. You burn the ergs, get rid of them all. They're useless. No, to be honest, training on an erg doesn't really prepare you. Although the motion and basic technique is kind of similar, it doesn't prepare you very well for rowing ocean, I wouldn't say. I think you'd get better for you do better by just doing long sessions, getting used to, physically exerting yourself for long periods of time. And to be honest, the mental side is by far the biggest part of the whole challenge. So we, every now and again, we'd throw in like at 4 a.m. or whatever, we'd wake up and just start our day. We'd go and do like a 2-hour gym session and then just continue that day as normal. So you can start to get used to like sleep deprivation and forcing yourself out of bed at, horrible times in the morning just to get used to being uncomfortable, really.
And then there would be periods of time when we'd try and maximize time on the water as soon as we got our boat. So that wouldn't necessarily fall into a usual day, but there'd maybe be block periods of a week or a long weekend where we'd go off on the West Coast and just try and get as many hours in on the oars on our actual boat that we were going to do the crossing in. That's the most important experience that you can have, the most important training that you can have in the actual boat with the actual equipment, with the three of us kind of trying to go through different drills and things like that, and just getting used to what it's like to live in that space. So that was one of the unknowns, that we could remove from the start point, from the start of the race, so that we were a little bit more comfortable setting off.
How did you guys work together on the boat? Because obviously you're brothers, you spent your entire lives together. Like, was it like a seamless teamwork experience, or was there any conflict, any kind of grating differences of opinion, that kind of thing, or was it just easy?
No, I'd say it's pretty easy.
But by and large, I'd say pretty good. I think just being siblings, you can be very honest with each other. I think some relationships you maybe couldn't be direct. So if there was something that was kind of getting to one of us, then you just kind of say it as it is, and that works quite well. But no, I think by and large that was probably our biggest strength from a morale level. I think one of the biggest strengths was that we were brothers, and we kind of did. But we got on pretty well throughout the crossing. So there were little niggling points, because just if you're 30 days into 3 or 4 hours of sleep per day, you're kind of at the end, you're very easily to set off, and you'll snap at silly little things, but nothing major.
I think we found that there was like whenever we would have some sort of like brief spat or argument, it was always because of a communication breakdown. I mean, without exception, I think it was always because, you know, one of us hadn't communicated that they were doing something or trying to get to some place in the boat so they could do whatever it was. It was always a communication breakdown. And I think because we're brothers, naturally, you can actually communicate a lot without ever having to say anything. So I think that was a real benefit for us, that, you know, that a lot of those, you know, I guess times when there could have been an argument, you know, we were able to communicate in different ways, I guess, maybe more than other teams, perhaps.
And it's kind of, I think it was picking up the slack for the others, because similar to, you know, your best mates, I'm sure if you two went on a, you know, on a big trip, you know each other so well that you'd be able to pick up if the other is struggling a bit. So it's kind of that dynamic on the boat as well. If one of us was having a rough day, you kind of just know that that's going to be you tomorrow or 2 days time. So the other two would do a bit more rowing, or, you know, prepare them their meal, or just try and make it more bearable, I guess. Yeah.
So let's talk about the race itself. Take us to the start line. What's going on in your heads? What are you braced for? What's the conversation like? What's the mood in the boat like? Like, build us up a picture of the beginning of the race, and then how that progressed through the race.
So probably we're starting like a week before we flew out.
A week before we flew out, yeah, that's probably even better. Yeah, I was going to say the preparation at the start line, but
yeah, on you go.
So a week before we flew out, I can't even justify. In hindsight, I have no idea why we crammed. We had these fundraising events, which were the main means of fundraising for our charities, and big black tie event at Edinburgh, and we had a big ceilidh and auction and all that lot. And there were actually, we organised one for about 200 people, and then someone independently who wanted to support the charities as well organised another one that was for about 100 people, 150, and then you organised, or some of your mates organised, another smaller one down in Bristol, which was more of a music night, because obviously music's been a huge part of the three of us growing up and playing music together, and we still do so. And so Ewan's probably the most musical. He's got loads of musical mates down in Bristol, and so they wanted to put on like a music night to help fundraise as well. So we had these sort of 3 events in the week prior to flying to the start line, and we thought we'd be, you know, it'd be fine, you know, although it's cutting it close, we'll get everything will be sorted. The boat's already shipped, because the boat has to be shipped in October, 2 months prior to the race start, so it has time to get to the start line. So we were, when we put these down on the calendar, we thought the boat will be shipped, all the equipment will be sorted, the boat will be ready to go. That's all fine. We have everything to sort. We'll have all our sponsors hopefully by then, because the boat's branded up. None of those were the case. Well, the boat had shipped, but we still had to brand up. We were still looking for sponsors. We were still about 10 or 20K short of what we needed. And then we had all these events to organize. So it was very foolish, but everyone seemed to enjoy themselves at all the events. And I think in total, we must have raised about 25 grand for the 2 charities just at those events. So then we set off to the start line, and you fly to the start line in La Gomera. You have to be there 10 days prior to the race start for safety briefings by the race organizers, for final little bits and bobs, adjustments to your boat, for what else, for all your inspection of kits and food to make sure you have all the rations and all the right equipment and all the safety equipment and all these things. And yeah, as I was saying earlier, like we had far too much to do in those 10 days. We completely underestimated what needed to be done to get us ready to start the race and to tick the box from the race organizer's safety point of view. So we kind of, whilst other teams were sort of, their boats were all branded, they were sort of taking it chilled, just going to safety briefings and then enjoying being at the start line, getting ready for the race sort of mentally and physically. We were just running around like headless chickens, drilling holes in the boat, branding it up, putting on the decals, polishing, sanding. It was incredibly stressful. So when it came to the point of us, we finally got clearance, we were in the water, then there was technical issues, our auto helm wasn't working, we couldn't get it, wasn't calibrated right, all these things were sort of mounting up. So when it came to the point that the race day and the starter gun went off, it was just a huge amount of relief. We hadn't even, we were so busy and had so much to do to make sure we felt we were going to be ready, that we hadn't, or certainly I personally hadn't really spent that much time thinking about what we were just about to start, what we were about to embark on. It hadn't even.
I remember leaving La Gomera as we rode away, and we were caught by this big wind and taken off the island. And I was desperately trying to download songs off my Spotify onto my phone because we just didn't have time. And it was the last thing on the list, and as the island was like disappearing, and the 3G signal was just disappearing. But it was such a relief to finally get on the water. That was the stress and the sleep deprivation actually. Before the race, we were definitely sleep deprived before even putting our oars in the water.
So in a way, this feels like on the one hand, and the way you tell it is a story of, we had so much more to do than we planned. We were underprepared. We were running around like headless chickens, all of that side of things. But then the other side of the story is you were completely present to what you were doing. And Jamie, you mentioned that when the gun went off was the first time you actually thought about the race. Whereas all of the other teams who were, in inverted commas, more prepared, probably spent 10 days sitting and worrying about everything that could go wrong.
Perhaps. I knew there was something.
Yeah.
Right.
That'll be what it is. I mean, to be honest as well, you define the tasks that you feel that you need to do before you leave, and we were very, very particular about getting quite a lot of things done, which was maybe beyond what other teams deemed necessary. So things like changing out all the bearings in the seats, or like greasing the oarlocks, or whatever it was. There was a whole list of things that we felt was really important for us to do. Granted, there was a whole list of things that we needed to do purely because we hadn't been organised, but we just ran out of time essentially before having to ship the boat. But I think we were probably hyper critical over a lot of the tasks that we set ourselves before leaving.
I think that it was. We actually we had a call with one of our trainers, Chloe Lantier, who's an endurance athlete and she lives in Chamonix, but we went out and spent a few days with her. But she's an amazing endurance athlete, kind of multi-sport endurance athlete, done the Marathon des Sables 5 times, and done a load of expeditions into the Arctic, and so she's very experienced. So we had a call with her the day before we left, and we were sort of sheepishly, we revealed to her that we were pretty sleep deprived and very stressed out. And she just said, even though she is the most organized person in the world, she said that that's the same with me for any endurance event I do. And I actually try and get into that state before an event, because she was saying that if you're too relaxed going into it, you're not, if you're already kind of a little bit stressed, then you're not kind of plunging into a very, well, I guess quite a stressful situation, being on a very small boat in an ocean. You're already adapted to that, and you're kind of, I guess
less of a shock.
It's less of a shock to the system, I suppose. And just going back to, I guess the point about like we hadn't really thought. I think prior to going out to the start line, I definitely had thought about it, and I was 90% very excited, 10% just total fear, because obviously you don't know entirely how your mind is going to react to being in the middle of an ocean, in a big sea or whatever. And there are a number of things that's the one area of training you can't really prepare for. You can't be in a 20 foot swell with occasional 35, 40-foot waves, it's very difficult to prepare for that. So there was, I think, a small element of fear. But I think, as you guys said, like actually at the start line in the week leading up to it, because we had so much going on, we were probably very present, and it just didn't really have the time to worry about it.
So then we set off. So the boats are all staggered by 5 minutes, and the quads, or the five-person crews, went first, and then the fourth, and then we were 3, and then the 2s and 1s. So there was 36 boats in total in the race. All racing overall, but also in their different sort of categories. And so that about half the fleet were ahead of us, if not more, because of the 5-minute staggering. And then, so we set off with pistons firing. We were full of energy, completely relieved that we were off. So that was us. If we'd forgotten something, we just have to make it work, which is quite a nice feeling, even if you think, oh God, maybe we should have had that or should have got that. You're like, well, we just have to, we're in it now. We just have to make whatever it is work. And so we rode off.
Is that. And,
yeah.
And for me, when I spent 10 years working in the film industry as well, and you spend months preparing and like dotting all of the I's and crossing all of the T's, and then you're off. And then it's just you and whatever you've got with you, and whatever you've got with you tends to work out.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's so easy to overthink these things. I mean, obviously there's equipment and things that are essential, and especially in moments of emergency, for like saving your life. But like a lot of the stuff that you overthink on land or in preparation, you can't. It's amazing how you adapt and figure them out. And Ewan in particular, being from his engineering background, he had done quite a lot of little tweaks to the boat. So we kind of knew that, okay, if this thing goes wrong, right, we know how to fix that. Or in honesty, Lalo and I would just be like, Ewan, how do you fix this? And stuff like that. But yeah, we kind of, and then we just rode off into the sunset, and naively thought, wow, this is gonna be fantastic. And then night descended, and the waves it was a really quick start to the race. So the waves, big swell, just off the coast of the Canary Islands, and strong winds blowing us in the right direction. So it was kind of like a turbo flume, just throwing you off the islands into the Atlantic. And we didn't really, in truth, so we had a weather router, a friend of ours who had helped us in a lot of our training, and a family friend of ours who we've been sailing with for a long time. It was actually, again, at the start line, we were speaking to the other teams, and we soon cottoned on to the fact that most teams seem to have a weather router, and we didn't have one. And we thought we should probably get a weather router, because we don't know where we're going. I mean, you've got a vague idea, but there's kind of tactics to what sort of weather patterns you should avoid, and if you should try and go more in a straight line towards the Caribbean, or do you duck south and go try and hit the trades, and then they'll aid you on and up towards the Caribbean. So the tactics of a weather router definitely do play a huge part in predicting and in adapting to what's happening in that moment, but also predicting what weather systems are about to come. And he came out to the start line to help us with the final preparations on the boat. And so we asked him then and there, but he was actually flying home. So there was a small window where we didn't have our weather router. So we had a rough idea of where our course was headed for. But we saw that there were sort of boats to the north of us and boats to the south of us. And we weren't sure which pack to sort of follow. So in honesty, we just kind of went for in between the two. It seemed like the best option, and it paid off. But night did descend, and it was pretty scary. I think that's the first sort of 12 to 24 hours of the race was definitely the time where I was most scared and genuinely just feared for my life, and like whether we'd bitten off way too much than we could chew. And I remember Lachlan was on the oars, and Ewan and I were meant to. We had a vague idea of what our shift pattern would be, but we knew it would take a while to break into it. And so we were playing about. So Lala was on the oars. Ewan and I were meant to be resting. It was night time. Ewan and I were feeling pretty seasick. So as soon as you stepped in, crawled into the cabins, you just felt sick straight away. So we'd been sick over the side, and we were just kind of laying in the bilges on the boat in the dark, getting sprayed and thrown about the place. and just look at each other, not really saying much, but just thinking, what have we gotten ourselves into? Because we had, before we knew that was going to be it, it could have been that for the next 40 to 60 days. And if that was the reality, it was going to be a really, really tough experience.
So the last time we spoke as we were getting ready for this podcast, you and Lachlan had spoken about you were having a bit of a hard time of it, and then you guys had a conversation and you made a decision to enjoy the process. Can you share that conversation, kind of the events around it, what led up to it, and the impact of that conversation on the rest of the race?
So I think I'm trying to remember when exactly the conversation. So we had like, it was kind of an agreement that that the most important thing for us was to enjoy the process, and our relationship as brothers was way more important than the race. But yeah, we had spent so much time and so much effort to go out and experience this adventure, and for us to then go out and then not enjoy it, that really, we really didn't want that to happen. So we'd made an agreement that we would, as we had done for the whole process leading up to that point, we were going to work as hard as we could and do, put in longer hours than other teams, and work as hard as we can at doing well in the race. But that definitely came second to us enjoying it, and came second to our relationship as brothers. So I think with that, you've got to kind of shift your perspective a little bit. If you're constantly, we had a great briefing actually before the race. There's a well-being officer who they were kind of talking through the importance of looking for positivity. It's very easy to get stuck out at sea, and then all you see is negative, and you're searching for negatives, and that's all you get back, because that's all you're searching for. And it's so true. It's so true. If you wake up and you're like, oh, I feel really hungover today, then like you continue to feel hungover, and it just you wallow in pity for the rest of the day. It's the same thing with anything in life, and I think if you search for that positivity, it has a real big impact on your day to day, if that's what you're kind of looking for.
I think that I think we kind of made that conscious decision of enjoying the experience prior to kind of when we were in the Canary Islands, and I think it was throughout the process we kind of had that approach, but we did have a sit down conversation in La Gomera, like, these are our key objectives: not falling out, enjoying the experience, going as fast as we can. And it was very clear in our heads that that's what we were doing before, which I think was a really good thing, because just when you're kind of really, really knackered, I think if you don't have your objectives very, like, extremely clear in your head, and you start trying to figure out what those objectives are when you're in that sleep deprived state, you're just never going to make good decisions. So we tried to make it as clear as we could. And kind of on that vein, I think like actually being at sea and rowing, the routine at sea is very straightforward actually. And all your decisions are kind of made for you. When you're going to rest, when you're going to eat, when you're going to get up and do your rowing shift. And so like really the only decision you have is to just enjoy the experience, because everything else is kind of taken care of, and you know what's going on. So I think like you could just, and I think some people sadly do sit there and just be miserable the whole time, or you can kind of just keep reminding yourself that like, wow, this experience is such a privilege. Like, we're very lucky to have this, and let's just try and enjoy it. So, I think that was a big factor, definitely.
What impact?
I think those
energy levels.
Yeah, energy levels.
Phenomenal. Yeah.
Sorry, on your level.
Right. Yeah. No. Definitely. Like huge. Definitely. Like the mornings when I don't know, you were on it was often quite noticeable kind of on the last night shift, because the nights were always quite tough because each of us would have like a couple hours rowing on our own. And it's dark, and if the weather is not totally favorable, then it could be quite bleak. But then I remember always on the kind of morning shift. So if you were on the 4 till 6 shift, the sun, it would be dark, and you'd be it's like rowing through treacle. And then the sun would come up, and then the next row next brother, usually it was actually who was on the morning shift. So it'd be Jamie on the morning shift, and then I'd get up to take over, and then we'd make coffee. And it was like the difference in kind of actually the act of rowing just felt a lot easier, because you're enjoying yourself and the sun's up and you've had your coffee, and it is amazing, like energy wise, how much kind of just your mindset definitely makes a big difference. Yeah.
Was it something that you guys had to like continually check in with, like, hey, remember we've got these 3 objectives, we're going to enjoy it, we're not going to fall out, and we're going to go as fast as we can? Or like, did you have to keep coming back to that, like when things got tough, when you miscommunicated, when you dropped the ball, when things went wrong? Or was it just kind of always there with you through the experience?
I think it was mainly always there, but there definitely were a few moments when we had to sort of sit back and we had a conversation between the 3 of us. Never more apparent was it within the first 24 hours. By the second day, the sort of priority of what those objectives were, just because we ended up, we'd chosen a good course, and we kind of shot off in front, and we were actually leading the whole race within the first sort of 24 to 48 hours, which was a huge surprise to us and a huge surprise to everyone else. And even within that period, we sort of had to sort of acknowledge to one another that, okay, what are we going to do here? This is great, but does this mean we're now racing, and is that now our number 1 priority, or are we still going to hold true to what we set out and said that we were going to try and achieve with this row? And so yeah, we made an agreement there that we knew, having spoken to people who had done the row in the past, that it took about 7 to 10 days to get into your routine. And once you crack your routine at sea, everything kind of falls into place, and you begin to enjoy the experience a lot more. And so we set the goal of 7 to 10 days. Let's race. Why not? Because it's going to be hellish regardless. So we might not enjoy it regardless. So why not give it our all, and then reassess where we are at that point. And hey, if we're still doing quite well and we've managed to enjoy it up to that point, then surely we're going to enjoy it from then on out. And it kind of that's kind of how it went. So after a week, we kind of had another discussion amongst ourselves, and we were pushing ourselves really hard. We were still holding ourselves at a 3rd overall, but more importantly, we'd got into our routine, and we were starting to actually really enjoy this sort of bizarre new life out at sea. It had become our new normality.
I love the way that just through the whole experience, from the beginning to the end, you just have, whether you knew it or not, you just set yourselves up for an enjoyable, successful, fun experience, just through your attitude, through your priorities, through the things that you were looking out for, through the whole process. It's really a beautiful example of how to well, the other side, as you mentioned, is that you can just sit there and be miserable and have a terrible experience. And just a switch in mindset is all that's required for an experience to be amazing or for it to be terrible. I think that's basically what I'm getting at. And you guys really, you set yourselves up so perfectly through the whole experience for it to be a success in every metric.
And it gets you through those days where like you've only got the option to like laugh or cry. There are days where you're miserable. You're so tired. It's pouring it down. You're getting hit by squalls, and it's kind of those moments where you're all in foul weather gear, just like shivering on deck, trying to push through the next sort of 2 hours or next stint, where you kind of just have to have a giggle to yourself and be like, this is just like stupid. This is ridiculous. Like, look at us in like 1,500 miles from any land. It's pissing it down. It's blowing a hoolie. It's like, it's horrible. We've eaten nettle curry for the past week or whatever it is. But like, you've just got to, I don't know, for us, it was just, yeah, kind of laugh at it. And then that would then make that moment enjoyable, not only at that time, but also now you look back on it. And I think all of us look back on the whole experience with extremely rose tinted glass, but you look back and you try and pick out the points where it was really miserable and really horrible, but then in those moments you were then trying to make it as enjoyable as possible. So it's quite difficult to pick out the really, really difficult, the hard parts.
So let's go forward to the end of the race. You arrive in the Caribbean. You've smashed this world record. You've done something that no team of brothers have ever done before. There's all of the kind of the on paper achievements, which are incredible. But I'm more interested in talking about who have you become as a result of doing this? How are your individual lives changed, and the lives of those people who are close to you? Like, what's different for you having done the race to before doing it?
I think having perspective over what actually gives you drive in life and a feeling of purpose. And I think that's something we really experienced, and particularly during the kind of months or so before the race, really having that purpose and having that common goal that was shared, the three of us, and making that dream kind of come true. I think that experiencing that has definitely made me want to pursue more things like that, trying to experience the same purpose, the same drive. And I think one thing that we've definitely all, agreed on is that we definitely want to go forwards and do, more things as brothers. Just, I don't think we quite appreciated how well we would work as a team. And that's something that I think we've taken away from it. But there's so many things. I think the lessons from doing an endurance event like this, appreciating hardship in a way, appreciating kind of a treat, delayed rewards, and there's so many things, kind of things that we can take forwards.
Appreciation as a whole, as Ewan was touching on there, is like definitely something that you become very aware of whilst you're out at sea, and then it's definitely fed into, like, kept on going throughout my life to this day. Like, you just like silly little things, like sometimes I'll be sitting on the toilet and I'll be like, this is a really nice toilet, and then because it makes you reflect on the experience of having to use a bucket for 35 days, and like that experience then makes the little mundane things, or the things that you just take for granted in life. Like sometimes I sort of check with myself, and I'll be doing the washing up, and I've got hot water and soap, and I'll be like, "Wow, hot water and soap! That's amazing." It's just little things like that. I think it's such a nice thing to have, that just sort of continually remind you of, yes, okay, you experience this hardship, but it gives you a new perspective that is very easy to ignore and lose track of in your day-to-day life. And then that obviously, yes, okay, it's to do with actions and using things and an appreciation for how lucky we all are, but also relationships and the people around us, and that you have a new appreciation for that, and gratitude towards others, I think.
I love that. So the way that we talk about that is we use the term comfort management.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a world of risk management where there are entire departments dedicated to the elimination of risk and making life more comfortable and safer. And so to bend it into the terms that you just described there, Jamie and Ewan, when we take away the risk, when we take away all the discomfort, then suddenly all this amazing stuff we have, like the fact that we just turn a knob and hot water comes out, right? It's amazing, but we take it for granted. And yeah, I love that term, Ewan, that you said, appreciating hardship.
It's something it's almost quite relevant to the the pandemic that we're in now. You live in suddenly you have these restrictions, whether that's for us on the boat, and we're unable to do very basic things. We can't socialize. You can't just pick up a friend and go, I don't know, go down for a pint or whatever. Like, you can't even go for a walk. You can't do anything. You're very, very restricted and limited. And I think that gives you perspective of things, when you're not in that limited situation. It gives you a new appreciation for those things. And I think it's same with the pandemic, to fly out to visit friends or socialize, in the same ways that we used to be able to, and so many other things as a result. But hopefully kind of coming out of the pandemic, we'll have a different perspective of, the things that are important to us.
Do you think it's made?
I think we definitely had that.
Sorry, do you think it's made your experience of dealing with the pandemic easier than other people who haven't, say, lived a restricted life?
I think looking for positives is one thing that I think try to do on a day-to-day basis, and sometimes it's hard for sure. But I think realizing that, I mean, we've spoken to so many people that have done the row that technically had essentially the same experience, but just for them it was the most horrific thing they did it with, and it was a different, very different experience, even though the actual day-to-day, the essence of the thing was the same. So I think appreciating the importance of really having a positive outlook and how much of an impact that can have on your life and your entire experience of things. I think that's probably slightly different. Obviously, we have nothing to compare it to. So this is the first pandemic that we've been through. I don't know about you guys. Yeah.
Jamie, how about you? What were your big kind of life takeaways? Sorry, Lachlan.
Oh yeah. So I was having to think about this. I think that I think it's probably similar to any situation in which you kind of just take on a big challenge that you're not entirely sure whether you are going to be able to do it, and then being able to do it, it definitely proves something to yourself, and maybe just opens the bounds of what you think is maybe possible and what is achievable. So I think that's probably for me is the biggest takeaway, that few things are probably, it sounds a bit cheesy, but if you break it down into bite-sized chunks, few things are kind of impossible. But I guess you just have to really think about your motives for doing them and make sure that you're sure about the reasons for doing something. But I think that's something I'll take away from it. And just with approach to kind of looking at, because obviously I'm yet to start, I'm still studying, so I'm kind of yet to start my working life, but I think that will influence my projections in life, kind of what I want to achieve, and just kind of doing something which gave me a feeling of such purpose, and be it the charitable element or just kind of the experience itself was just awesome, and it made me feel, I guess, fulfilled. So a hunger for more fulfillment, and doing something that fills me, gives me a feeling of purpose. I think that's probably the main couple of things. Yeah.
Amazing. That ties into something that I wanted to we're coming to the end, and I wanted to see if you guys had something to say to someone who has an impossible goal, right? Obviously, not everyone's impossible goal is to row across the Atlantic, but we all have things that we would like to do, that we would love to do, but there's no way that we can do them, right? It's impossible for me to do this thing. Someone else can do that, but not me. What would you say, having been through this experience and having taken on the Atlantic and taken it on in admirable style. Like, what would you say to someone who's on the edge?
I think I would probably say it's a bit cheesy, but I think like dream big. Don't necessarily limit your aspirations and you know the things that you want to try and do based on what people think that you can do, and then also just be comfortable being a beginner. Just be shit at something. It's fine, and don't kid yourself that you know you know more than you actually know. You're way better just saying, you know, I'm a beginner at this, and I'm going to learn, and I want to learn.
And just that people react really well to that when you're open to being a beginner. People don't react well to someone who's trying to let on that they know what they're doing and they're, I don't know, the expert in something they're obviously not. I would say my one thing would probably be we were quite decisive in what the objective was. So we were decisive that raising this much money and rowing across the Atlantic was the thing we were going to do. And all the kind of little hurdles along the way, that was just part of our route to doing that. So if we had, you know, we didn't get a sponsor or something went wrong, or that wasn't like, oh, that's got wrong, so now we can't do it. That was just kind of a stopping point along the way, but we were kind of clear that it was still going to happen. We just had to figure out another way of doing it. I think that would be my main kind of takeaway, or a bit of advice, I guess.
Can you summarize that in a nugget, in a sentence?
Don't let small barriers along the way get in the way of the kind of end vision. And be determined with the end goal, and hurdles along the way might seem like they're stopping you from doing it, but there'll be another way to do it.
Jamie, how about you?
I would say, certainly from our experience, don't try and do it on your own. I don't think there's anything to be gained from that, both from the riches of the resulting experience, but also just like if we hadn't had the three of us, and then from that our families, our friends, and then the support network that then grew after that, it not only made it possible, but it also made it a much richer experience and a much more fulfilling process. And so I think not only does it make it more achievable and easier to achieve, but I think it makes it overall just a much more valuable experience.
Yeah, and I don't think that necessarily needs to be like saying that if you want to do something as a solo, you shouldn't still pursue that. Like doing things, you know, on your own and not necessarily sharing the adventure part with someone. It's the recognition that actually in creating that solo experience, you benefit so much more from having a real network around you. So even doing something solo isn't really doing something solo, I'd say, or I don't know. I think you can gain more from.
I've lost you there, Ewan. But it's such an important thing for an entrepreneur as well, is that we feel sometimes as entrepreneurs that we have to do every aspect of our business alone. We have to do this entire adventure. We have to climb this mountain. We have to row across this ocean of starting a business by ourselves. And we have to know everything. And what you guys have just illustrated there so beautifully is that you don't have to know everything. People respond really well to you saying, look, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. Can you help? And the importance of having that support network, that team around you, even if what you're doing is ostensibly a solo operation.
And enjoy it.
And enjoy it. Yeah, absolutely. So what do you guys need help with next? Like for people who are listening, who are watching, what are you up to next? How can people get in touch with you? Why should they get in touch?
What do you think? We've got so many things on the on the boil. I guess the main thing for us is we really wanted to go forwards and do something together. I guess we're still trying to figure out exactly what that route will be, whether that's, you know, within business or whether that's doing a challenge. So yeah, we're up for anything. I don't know if Lachlan and Jamie kind of took you through some of our kind of aspirations for other challenges and plans for the future before. I don't know whether you guys.
We talked a little bit about various things, but yeah, I just wanted to kind of give you guys an opportunity to, if there's anything that people watching or listening can support you in, now's your chance.
Yeah. So I think there definitely will be more challenges to come, definitely. So social media kind of at BROAR Atlantic, I think it will probably maybe change when we move on to the next thing, but right now that's the platform on Instagram and Facebook. So at BROAR Atlantic, and yeah, we'll have more silly ideas to come, no doubt.
Fantastic. So we'll put your social media handle in the notes, at BROAR Atlantic, and yeah, I guess all that's left is to say thank you so much for joining us. This has been a fantastic chat. Congratulations. I'm sure it's not the first time you've heard it, but congratulations on achieving something truly incredible. An inspiration to us, and I'm sure an inspiration to everyone listening and watching. So thanks very much.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks so much. Cheers.
We want to take you up on a coaching session at some point, if that's all right.
We would love to do that. Yeah, absolutely.
We'll just stay on once we wrap it up, and we can have a little chat.
Oh, great.
Brilliant.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys.
Cheers.
It's been a pleasure.